I'm afraid it was the Mormons.
Okay, I have never actually watched South Park. Like, I have no interest in it, but I've seen that part of one of the episodes before, and I think it's hilarious because it's all these people in hell. They get there, and people who are very devout in different religions are all like, why am I here? Why am I here? The announcer guy is like, sorry, you had it wrong. And they're like, well, who had it right? And then he gives them the bad news.
I'm afraid it was the Mormons.
I just think that's so funny. But here's the thing, is that at some point, all of us will know what was right and who was right. All of us will know that for sure because we can see it with our own eyes. God will tell us. But here's the thing, is that we can also know beforehand. And that's what we're going to talk about this week. So years ago, I was on my way to my very first EFY that I was going to speak at, and I was so anxious, just wanted everything to go perfectly, and I got to the airport way early. I had to fly from Denver to Salt Lake City to do this EFY at BYU. And as I'm sitting there waiting, an announcement comes on over the PA that the flight was delayed by an hour, and I'm like, oh. So I pull out my scriptures, grab my handy scriptures, and start studying all of the stuff that I'm going to be teaching, because I had six lessons planned to teach over 2 days. And as I'm reading, this gentleman across from me is like, oh, are you a Christian? And immediately the angels started singing, and I'm like, this is my chance to have one of those like apostolic, miraculous experiences in an airport. I am going to convert someone today. Sneak peek, that didn't happen. So anyway, so this guy was really nice. He was an atheist, and he was interested in talking to me about religion. And the guy next to him was actually a shaman priest, and I still am not sure what a shaman priest is, but the point is we had this fabulous discussion, and we kept getting announcements over the PA. Oh, the flight is delayed by 1 hour, and then by another hour, and we ended up being delayed for 6 hours. But we had the most interesting religious discussion for almost the entire 6 hours. But here's the thing, is that the whole time I was talking, I was trying to prove that the church was true, bearing my testimony, being like, I know it's true. I know it's true. But this guy kept saying, well, how do you know? And I was like, well, I just feel it. I feel it. And he's like, you can't base knowledge on feelings. And I couldn't explain it properly. And it drove me crazy. But here's the thing that we're going to learn about this week. We're going to be diving into Alma 32 through 35. And what we're going to find out is that you actually can gain what would be called a perfect knowledge just by feelings and just through spiritual means. And that perfect knowledge is actually even more perfect than scientific knowledge because it comes from God, and God's knowledge is never wrong. Okay, but before we dive into all of this, let's figure out how did we get to this point that we are going to be talking about today. Also, you guys, I put on press-on nails, and I'm really proud of them. So if someone, mom maybe, could comment like, wow, your nails look so good, that would make me feel really good. I used to, when I would get home from school, put scotch tape nails on. These are a little better, I think. So if anyone would be willing to compliment me, I'd really appreciate it. So if we look, we are going to be in Alma 31. Basically, the book of Alma is covering the story of Alma and his buddies, the sons of Mosiah. So if you remember, Alma and the sons of Mosiah were all super bad, trying to tear down the church, and their dads were the king and the high priest. So this was like super awkward. But an amazing miracle happens. They're all converted. And then Alma decides, hey, I'm going to stay up north, and I am going to try and undo all the bad things that I did to the church by working with our local people. And so he stays there and is actually appointed to be high priest. He's also appointed chief judge, but he only does that for a while before he decides to focus just on being high priest. And the sons of Mosiah, they go south. They cannot stand the idea of the Lamanites suffering without knowing about Jesus Christ, without knowing about his atonement, and not being able to repent. And so they go south, and they actually convert thousands and thousands of people, bring them back up north. And so we've got all of the good guys together, but the Lamanites are not okay with this. And this is a big deal that I think kind of gets glossed over, is it mentions in the chapter where we have the great battle for Jershon. That's not what it's called here, but that's what I call it. The great battle for Jershon, where the Lamanites follow those anti-Nephi Lehi's who convert and who join the Nephites. They are not happy with this. They don't want their fellow Lamanites joining the Nephites. And so they follow them, and they have what is called the worst battle ever between the Nephites and the Lamanites in their entire history. And if you look at the chapter heading for when that battle happens, So if you look at chapter 28, the chapter heading, that's where the battle happens. This is 77 to 76 BC. So they have had almost, over 500 years of history between the Nephites and the Lamanites battling each other. And this is the worst one. Now, if you consider that, if you're American, our history is less than 300 years old. We've got 1776 to 1876 to 1976 to 2076. We haven't even gotten to 300 years. And we have had some pretty huge battles. And consider that this is the worst they've had in 500 years. This is huge. So they've just had this huge battle, and then Alma finds out that there is a group of Nephites called Zoramites. A guy named Zoram's leading them, and they decide, hey, we don't really want to be Nephites anymore. We're going to call ourselves Zoramites. We're going to worship in a different way, and we're going to live over in this little land of Antionum. And Alma is just heartsick over this. He is realizing, number one, their souls are at stake. He cannot stand the thought of their souls being at stake. But second, what if these Zoramites decide to go over and join the Lamanites? That's going to be in addition to their army. That is going to rile up the Lamanites, as we've seen with like the priests of King Noah. People who were once Nephites, people who once had the gospel, don't just leave it alone, right? They rile up the Lamanites. And so Alma is like, we cannot let this happen. We have got to go, and we've got to bring them back into the fold. And so he puts together this amazing missionary group. I call them the Great Eight. It is Alma and Ammon and Omner and Aaron. So those are three of the sons of Mosiah, and then he brings along Amulek and Zeezrom, and then he brings along two of his sons. So the Great Eight go to Antionum to try to convince the Zoramites not to defect over to the Lamanites and to come back into the fold of God. So last week we studied in chapter 31, where it talks about when they first see these people, and you'll probably remember the Rameumptom. They all worship on this Rameumptom, and they have this insane form of worship. It absolutely astonishes and depresses Alma and his group, but they're like, hey, their souls are worth it. We are going to go and preach to them. And so what we're reading this week is the actual preaching that they do among these Zoramites to try and keep them from dissenting over to the Lamanites, and also to get them back onto the covenant path. Now, just as a quick overview, what Alma actually teaches these people is pretty simple. And you might be thinking, why is he teaching them this? Like, shouldn't they know this stuff already? But if we look at chapter 31, the gospel, according to Rameumptom, like the Rameumptom Gospel, is pretty messed up. And so if we look at it, here is what the Rameumptom Gospel was. So in Alma 31, verse 13, so they have a place where people worship alone on the Rameumptom. Verse 14, they do this in public so everyone sees. Verse 15, they think that God is a spirit. Verse 16, they think they are elect, that they are chosen and better than everyone else, and also that they don't need a savior. Verse 17, they think that God is unjust, that he is sending some people down to hell just because, but saving them. And then verse 22, they all say the exact same prayer, so they don't think for themselves, they just repeat the same prayer. And then verse 23, they just worship God, or their spirit God, once a week, and then they don't think about him forever after that. So why is Alma starting back at the beginning in chapter 32? Because these people have messed everything up, and so he's got to go back to basics. And what he does for them is he teaches them how you can take faith and turn it into a perfect knowledge. And to me, it kind of feels like Alma is still feeling the ripples of Korihor. If you remember Korihor, we studied about him last week. His whole thing was, God's not real. You can't prove God's real. And Alma bears his testimony. No, I've got the scriptures that tell me he's real. I've got my own testimony, and I've got evidence. And so I think that maybe Alma he still has Korihor on his mind. He's like, I want to teach these people how they can know, no matter what's going on around them, that the gospel is true. Let's turn to Alma 32, verse 21. And Alma starts with basically explaining what faith is. This is where everything starts, is with faith. And he says, and now as I said concerning faith, faith is not to have a perfect knowledge of things. Therefore, if you have faith, ye hope for things which are not seen, which are true. So Alma's admitting here that when you start on your testimony path, you don't know for sure. You're just hoping. You have this feeling inside of you that you're like, man, I really want this to be true. I hope that it is. And then Alma 32 verses 27 through 34-ish is now our formula for how can we know for sure that something is true. And I'm going to say, let's take for example that I struggle with Joseph Smith. I'm not sure if Joseph Smith is really a prophet. I am, but like if that was my struggle, let's talk about that. So in Alma 32 verse 28, In verse 27, he says, you have to at least desire. So the first step is desire. And then 28, he says, we're going to compare this to a seed. Now, if ye give place that a seed may be planted in your heart, behold, if it be a true seed or a good seed, if ye do not cast it out by your unbelief, that you will resist the Spirit of the Lord, behold, it will begin to swell within your breasts. And when you feel these swelling motions, you will begin to say within yourselves, it must needs be that this is a good seed, or that the word is good, for it beginneth to enlarge my soul, yea, it beginneth to enlighten my understanding, yea, it beginneth to be delicious to me. Now behold, would not this increase your faith? I say unto you, yea, nevertheless, it hath not grown up to a perfect knowledge. Okay, so let's take this for my Joseph Smith example. So let's say I am struggling to know that Joseph Smith is a prophet, but first I hope he is. And so I'm making room in my brain for that hope and for that belief that he is. Then the second thing I would do is actually do something about it. So he talks about it as planting a seed. That means we actually have to take an action on it. And so if I wanted to know if Joseph Smith was a prophet, I would start reading the Book of Mormon. And as I was reading, I would be praying and going, Heavenly Father, help me know that this book is true, because if it's true, then Joseph really was a prophet, right? And so I would start to pray, and then I might have a couple of good feelings and be like, I think this might be true. I think maybe this is true, and that would mean that Joseph Smith is a prophet. Now, I don't have a perfect knowledge yet, but I have stronger faith at this point. So let's see how we get to perfect knowledge. Now, in verse 30, he says, but behold, as the seed swelleth and sprouteth and beginneth to grow, then you must needs say that the seed is good. For behold, it swelleth and sprouteth and beginneth to grow. And now behold, will not this strengthen your faith? Yea, it will strengthen your faith. For ye will say, I know that this is a good seed. For behold, it sprouteth and beginneth to grow. And now behold, are ye sure that this is a good seed? I say unto you, yea, for every seed bringeth forth unto its own likeness. Okay, so here's a really important part. He's talking about you're going to know that this thing is right or true or good based on what comes into your life or who you start becoming because of it. So if when you read the Book of Mormon, you become a better person because of it, if you feel closer to Jesus Christ, if you feel more peace in your life, if you are kinder to your kids, if good things follow, that means the seed was good. I am not going to plant a pumpkin seed and get an orange tree. It's just not going to happen. I am not going to plant a lemon seed and get a cucumber. Seeds become what they are. And so if I start reading the Book of Mormon and it's not a good thing, it's not true, I am not going to have good positive feelings about it. It is not going to make me a better person. It is not going to develop good things in my life. And so that's how he says that we can have knowledge, is we watch for the seed. So it all hinges on that idea of seeds bring forth according to their own kind. Then in verse 33, he says, and now behold, because ye have tried the experiment and planted the seed, and it swelleth and sprouteth and beginneth to grow. In other words, I'm reading the Book of Mormon. It's improving my life. It's improving who I am as a person. And now behold, verse 34, is your knowledge perfect? Yea, your knowledge is perfect in that thing. So we can gain perfect knowledge from God because he's perfect. And his formula for how he will tell us something and how we can know something perfectly is if we plant it. In other words, if we try it out, we experiment upon it, and then we watch what happens as we keep experimenting. And if it is a good thing, if it is right, if it is from God, it is going to bring good fruit into our lives. And then we have a perfect knowledge. I think this is so important for our kids to know and for us to know too. But how would our kids defend their testimony? If someone was talking to them, like my atheist friend in the airport, and was saying, well, how can you know that? Do our kids know how to defend their testimonies when someone else is asking them questions, or even when they are questioning themselves? Do they know how to defend that testimony? Last week, we talked about testimony pyramids, which Alma built a testimony pyramid when he was talking to Korihor, and this is a beautiful thing that I think we should do with our kids. I would personally, actually, I'll probably do this tonight, build a testimony pyramid with my kids. If you remember a testimony, ooh, look at that mark on my arm. A testimony pyramid, at the top is our experience. That's what we've been talking about today, is that I planted a seed and I watched it grow and I've had a good experience, right? Then the next part is example. People in authority. We're talking prophets and apostles whose testimonies of the Book of Mormon strengthen our own, or whatever we're talking about. And then the bottom is evidence. Things that we could present in a court of law and say, hey, this is proof that the Book of Mormon really is an authentic book. I think that is an amazing thing that we should all be doing with our kids on a relatively regular basis, helping them to grow their testimony pyramid and understand why they know what they know. Okay, that was just a basic overview of Come Follow Me for this week. I'm happy that you came and started here. If you want to study more in depth, here are some scriptures that you might dive into and some things to ponder on as you study them. Make sure to come back next week and start here and Come Follow Me with me.